from the Crypt.
What is up, freaks? Welcome back to Tales from the Crypt. It's your boy Marty Bent here on a Sunday morning. It's a morning podcast, weekend morning. I might have to put my NPR voice on for this, just because of the time of day that we're doing this. We usually do this at night. We're drinking coffee today. But before we jump into the interview with my excellent guest, this episode of Tales from the Crypt is brought to you by Baboon. Baboon makes Baboon makes technical duffel bags for all your life's adventures. These bags use waterproof materials, tear-proof, and will last forever. Every bag comes with free shipping, and a lifetime guarantee. Big fan of lifetime guarantees around here, Jeremy. Baboon to the Moon is offering this. So it's a quality product. We only push quality products on this podcast. So Baboon duffels are called go bags. They come in a small size and a large size. Small is your carry-on. Large is your check-in. They have backpack straps. You can carry them around. They're really aesthetically pleasing. They come in, again, they come in those two sizes. You can take them anywhere. You can drag them to the airport on any adventures you go to. I'm going to Paris in a couple weeks. I'm going to be bringing my Baboon bag. See why Condé Nast Traveler is calling it the ultimate weekender. So visit baboontothemoon.com. Enter the code CRYPT. That's CRYPT at baboontothemoon.com. CRYPT. Baboontothemoon.com. Code CRYPT. You'll get 10% off of a cool bag. All right, that was the first live read of an ad I've done with a guest in studio. Was that awkward at all, Jeremy?
Totally awkward. Totally awkward. Nah, good man.
Yeah, so I'd like to introduce you freaks to Jeremy Welch.
How's it going?
Welcome to the podcast, CEO of Casa.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. We were talking about it earlier. I've been playing around with your product, the Casa node.
Awesome.
We are, me and Matt Odell are experimenting with it, and we are going to be the first test for a full resync from scratch.
Excellent.
Before we dive into Casa and what you're doing with that product in particular, and what you guys are doing as a company, let's learn more about you. So how'd you get into Bitcoin? You're a Charleston boy. I'd like to hear that as a former Charleston boy myself. So.
Yeah, it's been a while. I first got into Bitcoin, so I worked in tech in New York. I actually dropped out of school. I went to Duke and I studied political philosophy there, and then I dropped out. And I came up to New York and was working in tech here. An advertising tech company that we sold into Google around 2010. So I got this big lesson as to how the real internet works, the advertising-based internet. It was very disconcerting to understand the whole thing, but spent a little while on that. Stayed about a year at Google, learned a ton. As far as a large company, it was impressive how they operated, and learned a ton from that, even though it's a little with some of my philosophical leanings was again a little disconcerting seeing everything. But I went back and I finished up school, and I at Duke finished up undergrad, and I specifically was really digging into this question of kind of the nature of capitalism and where just what the hell was going on, because it felt like all the people that I was, coming to New York asking hey, how does this work? How does this work? How does this work? That nobody had any answers, right? Mm-hmm. And this was middle of 2010 is when we sold the company. We were working on it 2008, 2009. And so that was through the kind of tail end, mid end of the financial crisis. Mm-hmm. And even all my finance buddies, people that worked in banking or trading, they didn't know what was going on. It's crazy when we look back at it, and we have these movies like The Big Short that kind of give some perspective on it. But it's still crazy. People just act like it didn't happen, or they act like, we knew now, and people with perspective, but they really didn't. And so you had these people in the movie The Big Short that did kind of see where the problems were. And I there are always these other kind of outside risks in the system that just because they're not playing out right now doesn't mean that they're not there. Mm-hmm. This is the Ludic fallacy. So Nassim Taleb's Ludic fallacy, right? Yeah. If you follow, he uses actually a turkey as the example. Is if you follow a turkey's life,
very prescient timing.
Yeah, they get plump. They get really, really plump, and everything's working. And then one day, we get close to Thanksgiving and lop off their head, right? And if you just followed a turkey's life up until that point, it would seem like a great life.
Yeah, if you project out into the future.
Yeah.
The turkey's life had only gotten better up to that point. Little did he or she know they're about to get their head chopped off.
Exactly.
So, and what he's describing with this example, right, is tail risk. So that's what
100%.
you're getting at here.
Yeah. And so I think out of that, I just had all these massive questions about capitalism generally, the kind of broader system we find ourselves in, governance and organization, and went back to Duke to one, just to hang out and take a break after working like crazy for a while. But beyond that, to dig into some of those questions, I did a bunch of independent studies and had some really good conversations, really good reading, and dug into some things that eventually that led me to Bitcoin. We put on a conference too. This is end of 2013, early 2014. Matt Carollo, who's now I think up here in New York.
Chain Code.
Yeah, Chain Code. Awesome dude. And
incredible dude.
Yeah, and he
learn more about better hash people.
He happened to be at UNC at the time, so we set aside our differences with basketball, and we still talked shit to each other. But we put together a little conference with a few other people, yeah, it was an early. There were a bunch of Duke people now that are spread out in the ecosystem, and we're pretty proud of that fact because we all like strategize. We're like, how can we get more
Tetris boys?
Yeah, there's those guys. There's some. One of the other guys that was around then is at 0x. A few people at Coinbase. They're all spread out, but it's good. So I getting back to your core question of how I got into it. It's 2012, 2013, and I was digging into this after we sold that company, and I was digging into these bigger questions, and then found it then, and it just clicked. I mean, everything that I was looking at and understanding about the nature of money and what matters about money, and then I'm also big into. I studied political philosophy, and so I think a lot about. I think the easiest turnaround is just cybernetics, like systems theory, and so from a systems theory perspective, you do have these massive effects that very small parameter changes can have in a system whenever you introduce feedback loops. And I think that, looking at Bitcoin, the structure of Bitcoin, that the outsized effects it'll have are going to be massive. Yeah,
it's probably the most elaborate tale that we've had in a while up to this day. But it's it's always interesting how the theme is very similar. People start with a question like, how the hell does all this shit work, and why does it work the way it does? That's sort of my tale. Is I was a senior in high school, just so happened to be taking intro to economics elective while the world was going to shit, and had a very very good teacher who was like trying to force us to ask the right questions and lead down a path of logical thinking of how these systems work. That's what set me down the path to Bitcoin. But you, coming from like the ad ops ad industry, and seeing the insidious nature of sort of the revenue models, I guess, for companies built on the internet.
Pushing clicks, right? Pushing clicks, instead of pushing other drugs, whatever. I mean, you're that's what you're doing, is you're trying to increase click rate by 0.001%.
Right.
There's been a lot of backlash against this ecosystem. And one thing I will say, I will take this slightly contrarian take, because everybody does talk shit now about ads. At the time, not everybody did. But there is like a growing movement around that. But we wouldn't be at this place. We wouldn't have gotten to this place where we can build these other systems if some of those things hadn't come through. So I do think that, if you follow if you just follow a pure kind of systems theory perspective, and you think about how things evolved, this was how things evolved. And in the early days, it didn't seem like it was going to be that big of an issue. Like if you look at newspapers, and the original advertising ecosystem really started with, you're talking about putting ads in newspapers, and you had all this other news. It was useful. It wasn't in your face. People read it on a Sunday. It didn't suck you in, and it wasn't, these massively addictive issues. And the news that we have today is just dramatically different from what you had at a kind of Sunday edition newspaper. So I think, again, this leads credence to this idea that these very small decisions can balloon, and over time with feedback loops can become these massive issues. But advertising started that way, and now it's grown into something much more different, and we know a path out, and we got to take that path. So
Yeah, so that's what I was going to ask. Like, is there a path out? And because it seems like we're pretty inundated and we're sort of ingrained in this revenue model of how to make money on the internet. Like, what is the path out? You think we have to have events like data breaches at Facebook, all these other huge companies to have people realize, like, holy shit, maybe this isn't. Maybe the cost of monetizing the internet this way is too much on an individualistic level.
Yeah, you're gonna have to have not just the actual data breaches, but you need an alternative. You need an alternative solution that will be the driver anytime one of those breaches happens. That'll drive people more and more to something else. And that's similar now that Bitcoin exists. When you get a situation like Venezuela, or you get, people are finding Bitcoin and they're never going to go back, and you'll see similar type behavior, I think, in the space. But there's a line, and I forget if this is from a specific book I read, but in terms of technology adoption, I do think the kind of key principle is it usually takes a little longer than most people expect to get there, but once things start changing, it always happens much, much, much faster than people anticipate.
Yeah, it's the line, you overestimate what can happen in 5 years and underestimate what can happen in 10.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's interesting we're coming up on Bitcoin's 10-year anniversary.
Right.
So how do you think it's done in its first decade? You think it's undershot your expectations, overshot? Let's get a State of the Union from Jeremy Welch right now.
I don't really have expectations. It just other than like, I'm not putting necessarily a timeline on it, and I think that again a lot about. I won't go into that much detail on the philosophical side, but I think
why not? Why not?
I'm not a huge.
Don't be afraid, Jeremy.
I think things are just going to play themselves out. So there's not a point in giving a necessarily a play-by-play or an expectation or where it could be. There's some influence that we can have, but giving a timeline, it's one thing to give the kind of analysis of what the implications are just from a logical perspective. It's another thing to tie in the timeline or a 10-year and time itself, like that's a questionable thing. So I think that the one thing I try to do, or I think a lot about, is how we anthropomorphize things. We think about human time spans, and we think about like these decade markers, but they really don't mean anything. And so if you kind of take a step back from that, just say like, okay, how's the process playing out? I mean, sure, we can have these evaluations every once in a while, but it's a 10-year marker is totally meaningless.
Yeah, we're gonna get to the tweet I have on the screen, but first, what was I going to say? I completely agree. Oh, yeah. I've been really diving and liking the notion that Bitcoiners are very descriptive and not prescriptive. We're just describing a reality that exists now, and the amount of people that understand this reality is very small at the moment, but it is... We believe, I would argue, that it is an empirically better way to do things compared to the way we're doing them now in certain aspects of our life. And we are saying, hey, this is a better technology. It'll take over time. It just, more people need to come to the realization that this exists.
Yeah, I think that even the term better is hard to argue about, because it just depends on kind of who you are. For certain people, they like their fiat money and they like their fiat systems. That's true. They prefer that. They'd prefer the control that comes from that. I think it just depends on how you're measuring, right? And we specifically measure, our mission at Casa is maximizing personal sovereignty and safety. And if you look at an individual person's ability to have control or have sovereignty and safety, then I think that yes, like from that measure, that it is absolutely better and it is measurably better. But there's a lot that you can judge that on depending on who you talk to. But the other thing too is I think that it will change. I think that there are certain types of people that again, if Bitcoin's an option, they'll choose Bitcoin. If no Bitcoin's there, then they're going to be like, yeah, I love fiat money. Everything is great. And, so it's going to be an exciting few few years, no matter what.
Right.
As this, I think it has moved a little faster than I expected. I will say that. Like, I think that we're in a much better place, and everybody that's complaining about it's what are we at today, 5,500 or 6,000 or something. I know we had a little. I don't even pay attention to the price that much anymore. I think more about like product space and product adoption. Yeah, we're at 5,500.
Stop dumping. We're living off at like 55, 44 right now. No, that's like, this always happens in these interviews. I'm like, I want to ask you 20 questions at once.
Well, do it.
Because
hit all 20. I'll circle back to everything.
You brought up the mission statement of Casa.
Yeah.
And I think you've assembled one of the strongest teams to make that mission come true. I mean, Jameson Lopp, Elena, and crew are people that have built.
Yeah, and we have more that aren't announced yet. So
yeah,
we can't for security reasons and other things. But it's a crew. It's a damn dream team. It's crazy, and I'm just honored to be around them and learn from everybody. I think that the thing about all of those people coming together is that it just comes down to the mission.
Yeah, how did this crew assemble?
They assembled themselves.
Yeah,
right. I mean, that's what I'm talking about. Is it's like, how did Bitcoin assemble? How did all these pieces were out there in the ether at some point, and then it kind of came together. Enough people saw where things needed to go, and I think that we're in a similar place. Perhaps my only skill was writing a single mission statement or codifying some of what we were all discussing, and then saying, hey, what do you think about this? Hey, what do you think about this? Hey, what do you think about this? And then, if everyone has that discussion, everybody agrees, yeah, that makes sense to me, then there's no recruiting. That's not kind of how it works. It was just a mix of the right timing, and then also those people recognizing, yeah, this is actually the most important, not just the most important thing that they could work on from a business perspective, but literally the most important problem available to humans today to work on. And that's a crazy statement, but it's true.
Right.
I mean, if Bitcoin, there are these singular moments in history when something changes, and where what Bitcoin does make available, if it goes away, now that all of the other states and kind of everybody else is kind of aware as to what it could be, then we're in a load of hurt. It's going to be a major issue. So solving this problem around maintaining your self-sovereignty and doing it in an easy to use way, and thinking about how we can make Bitcoin personal key management, all of those things, improving all those things is just absolutely critical. Yes,
and I am very thankful for the work that you guys are putting into these solutions. Private key management, especially, it's one of the biggest hurdles in the space. And so, like, I fancy myself a product nerd as well. In another life, I would be a product manager. I've studied UX in the past. I've tried to work on product teams. After transitioning from finance, it's hard to break into. You have to build shit. And that's what I realized. I had to build the newsletter, which is quote unquote a product, but a poorly designed from an aesthetically pleasing.
It's functional. That's all that matters.
Exactly.
Yeah, people overplay the aesthetics.
Yeah,
and aesthetics should even just feed into function ultimately. So.
Exactly. So, but that's what I want as a product nerd. I think the way you guys are approaching this self-sovereign suite of products is beautiful, because the private key management was your first. It's basically an iterative process. It looks like at this point, you figure out custody first, and then all right, then you figure out hardware, node management, and making it easier for people. So I just want to get like a peek into your brain of like how you guys have built this roadmap. Has it been very, okay, we're at this point, now let's build this? Or do you guys have like a suite of tools that you already know you're going to build?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I think of this process, it's not about, so I'd separate it out into two things. If we were going to talk about like just the product development, design, and then just kind of the pure how you find a product map in the first place. And so the second question I think is part of what you're asking at first, and that there's something interesting about this question of like, what's the difference between capital wealth and something that's useful wealth, and then just another product. And that's a and the difference there is that capital wealth, like someone's going to use that to eventually make more money or to survive in kind of a capital based system. And I use an example of So say you're some boomer, you've pulled out some of your fiat money in a retirement account, whatever, and now you go create or you go retire and spend your time remaking or restoring old cars, right? Like, yeah, there's a market for some of those old cars, but you might be restoring a car in some color and something else. It's like just totally personal to you. The total market of people that would actually buy that car is actually quite small. It may be non-existent. Now, is that car, you created something new, but is that actually wealth, right? Is that actually capital wealth that can be brought back into the capital system? Does it have value in that capital system? And I think people like one question around product management and one question around just like generally building companies is just because you can create a product doesn't mean that it will translate into something that's actually useful for a business, right? And so there's this nuance around product development that one, you have to solve a problem. You solve it for yourself. You make sure there's a market for other people too. It does have to feed into this kind of having more value and generating capital itself. And then if you get some of those things right, and to contrast that specific car example, then if you build, if you rebuild or if you just talk about kind of your average BMW or your average Porsche that just is a massive market or your average Tesla, right, that has a massive market. I mean, I think Tesla is a perfect example there because people didn't know that market was there, but Elon kind of helped generate that market. But it was obviously everything he's creating, people are buying strongly. So I say all that to come back to this question of product development and building out a product plan, is that you do have to start somewhere, but frequently you'll get these like tugs in different directions on what people will actually pay for and what will provide value. And you have to be careful not to go down certain paths, right? Because certain paths, it's just like nobody's going to buy that, even though it might be useful for you or it might be useful for the person. It may not fund itself. And that's why these questions of these underlying business models, such as advertising, are just absolutely critical. And why I do think that Bitcoin is going to just absolutely flatten pretty much every company that's been based off an advertising-based business model. So Facebook, Google, like all these companies.
Why do you think that?
Because the underlying core business or the underlying core assumptions, right? The reason why advertising exists in the first place is all driven around a fiat system. It doesn't have to. If you, it comes down to kind of payment processing, and running something like Lightning Network channels is and if you have. There are still some hurdles and there are still some costs. And so you're not going to open Lightning channels with just everyone. I mean, you have to open one of those channels. But the bottom line is that the cost of interaction on Bitcoin network, on the broader kind of programmable money network that we're heading towards, means that the incentives around advertising, which are basically kind of displaced every year whenever it's just a cost of processing a transaction, like the $3 or $2 or whatever you have to pay a payment processor. The overlying business model around Google or Facebook is just going to collapse out of that. So anyways, that's like just kind of some rambling on product development generally, but to go back to Casa specifically, we started, we were building an application on Blockstack, and we were looking at the kind of how you would rebuild models, what changes. We specifically were looking at Airbnb. So Airbnb, they built a lot of people don't know this, but they built their own payment processor.
Oh, really?
Yeah. One of the ways early on, I mean, they're a very technical company. They've got, beautiful products, very well built, but there are these certain questions about Airbnb's business model that just doesn't make sense until you start digging into the underlying model. And one of those that we were asking is why the hell can't I search by my friends? Like, why can't I search and say, filter all of these Airbnb properties by degree of friends? Like if I have 3 degrees away, I want to stay with that person instead.
Yeah.
That feature will never get added to Airbnb.
I don't know if I'd want that feature.
Well, I wanted that feature because I figured it would save money and it would also you get a little bit of trust. And yeah, there's some of these people that run regular Airbnbs and it's easy to use, but
I don't want to, like, if I ever did, God forbid, if anything ever happened to the house, I wouldn't want that friend of a friend having a scorn thrown my way.
Well, that's from the position of I could see that.
Yeah.
Like there's there's definitely kind of the social cost around that. And that's really interesting. And that's a different thing.
Yeah.
But ultimately, kind of what we were thinking is even just being able to search and filter in a new city, if you could be around somebody that you actually kind of had some connection to, that's a beneficial thing. You also could have, deals around friends. But as we dug more into that, ultimately, they'll never add it because you could then start routing around the payment system.
Yeah.
Right. You could just say, hey, I'm going to pay you under the table. I know you,
I'll cash app you.
Exactly. Cash app you something else. You have some social connection.
Yeah.
So it is all tied back to their core payment processor. And how many other companies are kind of based that way? So we were looking at that question. We were building something on Blockstack, and we got a very clear picture of what the stack would look like if you were starting to break everything out. And you have to look at, so you've got, you can look at centralizing or decentralizing across a number of different areas around compute itself, data storage, payments, just general kind of public or private sharing. There's a lot around even kind of making data accessible for search or for future, experiences like comments on an Airbnb app kind of thing. Like how do you centralize that? Where is that stored? There are all these other questions, and we were looking at how would we re-architect something to enable some sort of new experience, specifically around home sharing. And we got a very clear picture into what this kind of future of applications would look like. So the first thing we actually built was we built a node. The public story right now is that we had the key management first, and then we built the node, but it's actually reversed. We actually built a node. Yeah. We built a node first. We were running Bitcoin, Blockstack, Litecoin. We actually ran Peercoin because we were trying to test around with proof of stake or partial proof of stake systems and see what that was like. And so we built a little node device, and we were selling them very, very quietly, and we were surprised at the interest. And then out of that, we very quickly saw that there's a massive problem with having a device in your home and having no key management related to it. And that then pulls you into these other questions around key management. And you shouldn't build key management only for one device. You really should build key management overall. So we realized that we couldn't even properly tackle a singular device without better key management. So we went to that. And then only after we had a really good solution around that have we come back around now to the node. And as a whole, the experience is really coming together. So jumping back to the just kind of the process, product development process, that we started one area, we saw some clear demand, we saw a massive problem, and you would lose money if someone just like picked up your box, right? Went into the key management side, people would pay for that very quickly, started building the business off of that, and then have come back around to the full node.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. Like I'm one of the first owners of the Casa node. Very excited to get it up and running. Also the first to have initial download issue, so I'm resyncing.
Of course.
But I think from a holistic experience, like even that, so you guys have a private Telegram chat too, and like for UX data, that's incredible. Like getting the first users and getting feedback right away. Like so, you guys, that's like an innovation. I mean, Slack groups and Telegram channels have been big in crypto for like a community perspective, but like taking it to a product perspective. And I was thinking about this like last week, just like being on a UX team, like this is like a revolutionary way to like get instant feedback from users and iterate faster. And
yeah, it is. I'll tell you something else though. That's a major issue that hasn't been solved in this space. Is we are. And this is not actually being talked about that much, but you have the whole advertising industry, right? And that one seems a little obvious because, if you have data trackers on websites, whatever else. The one that people aren't really talking about, and specifically around product development, is what I call surveillance product development, where every move you make, like if you open any of your iPhone apps, every single iPhone app that you have on your phone is tracking every tap you make, every move you make, everything you're doing. Every website you go to is tracking every pixel you click, like every movement.
Heat map it.
Yeah, you can heat map. It's absurd. Yeah. It's absurd. And that is not going to fly if we're rebuilding in an advertising-based internet where everything flows back into some ad being paid. People accept it because they're getting a free product. In a place to where you're actually paying for a product, you're self-sovereign, it's your own data, and your own money that you're worried about, that is not going to fly.
Mm-hmm.
So when I talk about how these companies are going to be wiped out, that's another very fundamental way is like we don't have any tracking in our systems. We've ripped out. We even had a small like chat thing that would help us with a quick chat in the app with a few clients, and we ripped that out too because we just realized that there's way too much data sharing that's happening, and so we've minimized our footprint and removed all kind of data, and then we rely on we have to rely on direct customer communication. It's the oldest way to do real product development, and now I think in the future it's going to be the only way.
Yeah, no, and it's probably a better way, or maybe not.
Well, it's hard because people don't
know what they
exactly what they need. You have to it's kind of an art to ask the right questions. But I also think that putting everyone in a damn panopticon, which is Jeremy Bentham panopticon, the whole that's effectively what we've built.
What is that?
So a panopticon is a prison design where you had a central tower that looked out on all of the rooms in the prison.
Okay.
Right? So the guards would stand in a central tower, and the idea is that you'd never know, the prisoners would never know if the guards were looking in your direction. But because the tower was in the center and you had some surveillance there at all times, all of the prisoners would behave better. Because they never knew if they happened to be looking their direction. And weirdly enough, if you look at like all of the more recent, at least every public school and a lot of buildings that I've noticed this. I'm sure other people haven't, and I'm sure it wasn't the exact reason for the design, but a lot of like kind of open floor plans, open school plans, they're basically designed in the same system, but the whole surveillance system and the advertising system is based around the same thing, right? They're sucking in all this data on you. Now we have like the Chinese, the score in China, right? The social score in China. It's fucking panopticon, and Bitcoin is going to break out of that. All these tools, like we're not, people are going to rip out. The Blockstream actually just announced their Explorer as well, their Bitcoin Explorer. One of the things, if you look at, a lot of people didn't notice this and it wasn't much discussion about it, but one of the things that they said is no tracking, right? It's like, it's going to become a thing. It's going to become a big thing.
More of a social cue then, too, where people will be like, I don't want to use this website unless I know they're not tracking me.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. That's it. And no, this is something that fascinates me, like the idea that maybe we fucked up on the internet the first time around or something like that, the way we structured it. And do we have this grand opportunity to rebuild it from scratch? Doesn't need to be rebuilt from scratch, or are we able to sort of slowly over time build these tools in a parallel system?
Sure. So the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right?
Yeah.
And I think that we've just gotten further and further down in the system to where we're looking around, and some people are waking up and realizing, holy shit, like this is bad. And the funny thing is as the political climate, the other thing that I've frequently cited to people as a reason why I think things will break down, and even some of the centralized crypto companies will break down, is that our geopolitical situation is just spiraling out of control.
It's crazy.
Right? It's getting crazy.
I write about it. I've been writing more about like geopolitical than happenings than like Bitcoin happenings more recently, because it's just
the same thing. They're the same thing.
Exactly.
They're going to be the same thing over the long term. I mean, that's why I talk about like, Bitcoin computing. This is all the same thing. It's going to absorb everything. A lot of investors look at it as this like niche kind of frontier tech. I'm like, no. Give it 5 years, and every company is going to be discussing these exact same issues, because
you're going to trigger some
people don't
right now.
People are not properly anticipating that as the geopolitical situation gets more and more complicated, a lot of the centralized business models will just break down. Right?
Why is this?
Well, think about just shipping a product, just dealing with customs fees. Very simple one. This doesn't even get into the question of whether the country will actually allow your product in there. Whether you would have to do a deal with a country like China and Google and their whole censored web search, right? But just shipping a physical product into a company, customs fees are going up. Trump's playing this whole tariff game. So that's becoming an issue. Borders are going to become more of an issue. Now you also have the culture wars. and it's going to be very hard. Most, or, I won't say all, but like a lot of consumers are now expecting their companies to start espousing their kind of cultural propositions, which is insane.
Right.
And so it's getting harder and harder.
Kendall Jenner handing a Pepsi to someone. It's ridiculous, man.
It's crazy.
It's scary. Are you optimistic or are you scared?
No,
for
I'm
the
very
disruption?
optimistic.
Yeah.
I'm very optimistic, but I think that I think it's going to be a lot more painful than most people anticipate. But what kind of comes out the other end is going to be great.
Yeah.
So,
no, it's a bit cheesy to say, but it does feel like there's a bit of an awakening happening where people are beginning to think more thoroughly about how the world we built around us could be constricting. We could be building a prison for ourselves. We arguably already have, and we need to break it down and build something else. Yeah,
that the scary thing on the geopolitical side is that what most people don't think about is, okay, I'm building, and what everybody said. It's you can go look it up. What everybody said is, oh, it's fine that Obama has these surveillance powers, and we want him to catch the terrorists, and we want him to. And what everybody said was like, wait a second, if you give Obama all of these tools, and then someone else comes in and then you would go ask anybody that supported Obama, and now Donald Trump has the same powers, right?
Right.
And then now everybody's freaking out. Everybody on that side is freaking out about Donald Trump, but anybody that supported Donald Trump is kind of happy about it because he's going down and tackling all of a bunch of issues. But then everyone's saying to any Donald Trump supporter, hey, look, like if you expand his powers, then if it flips the other back around again, then that person's, and they're not even thinking about that.
Yeah. No, and it's what I think. There was a stat out there. It was like people like I'm fucking tired of elections. I can't take it. Every 2 years, it's fucking exhausting.
Yep.
And the hoopla that happens, the fervor that gets driven up by the media, and the social pressure to have something to say or pick a side. It's fucking bullshit. And you go back and look at the stats, like I think 31 of the last 35 midterm elections, like the sitting, like the party of the sitting president, like lost seats in the House, like 31 out of 35. So like there's always going to be like a backlash. It's just noise. And the same thing fucking happens. Like, and while the same thing's happening, like it's these presidents and elected officials are making more authoritarian, dystopian, Orwellian laws. And it doesn't matter who's president or who the incumbent is at any given time. It's going to change, and the stats prove that. And that constant back and forth is actually a lack of change in the future, like in the long run. And it's going to hit ahead. It is heading ahead. Donald Trump's our president. Like,
and you ultimately one thing that I, again, kind of during this time when I went back and I studied and I was learning about Bitcoin and broader capital system, another thing I learned, and this is kind of shocking that more people don't realize this, but there's a book that Council on Foreign Relations published. So this is not like some fringe theory, but they were just tracking waves of democratic politics, waves of authoritarian politics, and there's been this massive surge in authoritarian regimes all over the world. Mm-hmm. And that's increased. That has not decreased. There's no ebb to that more recently. And that's not something that people are talking about generally at all. And so again, bringing that back, I don't care who you support as president, who you support locally in your elections, who you support, or if you just choose to opt out. I won't speak for everybody on our team because we have people across this political spectrum. That's one of the beautiful things about our team is everybody believes in this kind of core mission of, again, maximizing personal sovereignty and safety. They have different views as to where they would take that and they would take their lives, and that's perfectly acceptable. But ultimately what we're bringing back to is that people should just have a choice. Mm-hmm. They should have a choice to check out of a system that is treating them poorly or potentially even, a catastrophic situation like in Venezuela. And again, people's choices are getting more and more limited, and we're trying to add to that. So I think it's really important that people there are a number of kind of short-term views from both investors and companies and even some consumers in terms of kind of what they want in the Bitcoin ecosystem. And if too much of that happens, then these long-term things about, literally just having your own kind of personal independence are going to go by the wayside, and we can't let that happen. So,
yeah. No, it's never a dull moment. And it is an invigorating industry, quote unquote, to be in. Like you were saying earlier, like it's mission driven. You have the chance to disrupt the world and disrupt arguably the biggest app in the world, which is money. So one thing that's been big in the crypto Twitter sphere recently is like narratives and the changing of narratives of different projects, and whether some narratives have more merit over others. And I'm sort of, it's getting to a point where people are sort of misconstruing the narrative, if you will, where people are paying more credence to what may be the loudest narrative at a particular time, but it may not necessarily be the best narrative. And people are trying to say that, like Bitcoin in particular, like, the store value narrative is pretty new, but you go back to bitcointalk.org, Hal Finney was talking about like Bitcoin as a settlement layer for banks in 2010.
Yep.
So did you have any views on this? Do you have a particular narrative that you like, or view of Bitcoin and how it should scale going forward?
So again, I'll jump back to this like perception of it doesn't totally matter.
Yeah.
These like I'm not aiming to be a thought leader. I think that like any of the pushes around thought leadership, like ultimately we just have, I kind of constantly push back to individuals, like whatever you kind of core belief is, whatever you want to, and I think that, trying to shape that too much is an issue. But I think that ultimately, we've been through this wave, and we've this is now the second one, right? Like, where we've seen some of the same projects try to come back and be tokenized, at different waves. And as of the SEC action on Friday, right? I haven't read the full document. I've read snippets of it, but it
doesn't look good.
It doesn't look good. It doesn't look good.
No, that's actually, we can jump into that too. That's
So I was about to send this tweet out later, but I'll make the statement that crypto is dead. Long live crypto. Yeah, that's it. I mean, crypto is dead. So
crypto in particular,
crypto is dead. Yeah. That concept, I think that was the marker, the SEC marker, and I don't think it's going to be apparent to everyone, or it won't ripple out extremely fast. But give it a few months, and let's see how many of these projects actually refund their investors, and just this kind of crypto industry crypto is dead.
Last year was insane, man. It got out of control.
Yeah,
really quickly, like to the point where like everybody was talking about it. Everybody was like trying to build a company or a business plan around a token model, not even understanding what it is. Like, I had to go to Consensus last summer with Barstool because like they wanted, like some ICO wanted to like advertise on Barstool, and that's how I Trojan horse myself into Consensus and was like, what the fuck is going on? It was like, as like an observer, it was crazy to see a mania filled with such a lack of knowledge or lack of understanding of what people are actually working with happen in real time. It was like looking around, like many times throughout last year, especially towards the end of the year, where I was like, am I crazy? Like, is this really going to take over? Is Tron going to take over the world? Right. Stuff like that. So it'll be interesting to see, because compared to 2014, 2015, where really that mania was more like shit, copy paste code of Bitcoin, change parameters, make a proof of stake, proof of work, pre-mine, whatever.
Totally.
Whatever. Yeah. And Ethereum just made it considerably easier with the ERC20 tokens. But it'll be interesting to see as this bear market persists, what gets built and what the next mania looks like. Do you think it'll be as broad? Do you think thousands of tokens will be pumping in the future, or do you think there will be a chaff that rises to the top?
There will be another mania.
And I'm asking you,
but
you don't like to predict anything. I'm asking you to predict a bunch of things.
But I there will be another mania. I mean, there's this is like just getting back to kind of human systems and how human investment works, and how you have these Rene Girard and his whole theory around memetic theory. I don't know if you know that one.
Big on memes here.
Yeah. So memetic theory actually shifts out of so you have mimesis and memes, which is really Dawkins.
Mm-hmm.
And then Rene Girard, memetic theory is about how people learn and about social contagion and about about how violence emerges in cultures.
Okay.
Have you heard this at all?
No, let's dive into it.
Okay. So, and this guy, actually the reason why Peter Thiel originally invested in Facebook was purely based out of his deep understanding of memetic theory, and he actually studied with Girard. And it's a kind of core, from what I've read, it's a kind of core influence of his philosophy and his investing outlook.
Mm-hmm.
But the way the way in a very oversimplified explanation, if you have desire basically that comes from humans, and that they desire certain outcomes, or that they desire certain products, and the way that we're connected, we're talking as two human beings, and you have a third person in the room, and now we're all kind of connected and talking and exchanging information.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, the kind of hierarchy of respect in the room actually dictates kind of where the desire amongst all the humans flows.
Okay.
And so if you like cold brew coffee,
mm-hmm.
right? And I have a lot of respect for you, and I've never had cold brew coffee before, but I see you drinking cold brew coffee, then I'm likely to try to drink some cold brew coffee,
mm-hmm.
right? Because my respect for you kind of channels through that into the products, the other things you use. So very easy kind of, it's a very easy way to explain how the kind of celebrity power and
mm-hmm.
How that whole world has kind of emerged and why it's important, because
Instagram thotties.
Yeah, people need this kind of mechanism, right? And
signaling mechanism, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It is. It's signaling a status mechanism. All the status games kind of come out of parts of this, but the Rene's theory and it's mimesis. Mimesis is just mimicry, right?
Okay.
And so the way humans learn is through mimesis. They, out of some respect or some kind of draw into another person, that they see someone do something and then they repeat that same behavior. And it's so you can actually watch this like ripple out over when, another kind of example around this is if you look at like elite athletes, mm-hmm. one person breaks a record, all of a sudden like a ton of other people break that record.
Yeah.
But it takes one person to like break through, and then everybody else channeling and seeing, okay, this is possible, and then it happens. And similar with products, you get these massive these massive celebrities that people are following and desire to be like or desire to be with, and then they say they're buying one product, and boom, like that thing just explodes in sales. Mm-hmm. And the product didn't change. So what changed? It was like people's desire somehow.
Yeah.
So ultimately that comes back to, he explains that violence actually erupts whenever you have a zero-sum situation. So if there's only one cold brew coffee, mm-hmm. right, and now we have a whole room of people, they respect Marty, that they all want cold brew coffee, then violence is going to erupt. Somehow there's going to be a fight to get to that singular resource. Now, the reason everybody wants that cold brew coffee is total bullshit. Mm-hmm. It's just out of this like memetic contagion mechanism.
Yeah, you should not be trying to imitate me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the lesson, right?
Yeah.
Is that you got to be really careful about whether the decisions you're making are based on, just imitation of someone, or whether you actually have kind of good reason for that.
So do you actively walk through life with this in mind? Like thinking, am I trying to be...
I think after I was aware of it, I
mm-hmm.
definitely thought through like, okay.
Am I being an influence or being manipulated?
Well, no, it's not so much manipulated. It's just how much of what I'm doing and how much of the direction I'm going, or if I'm responsible for a company and we're, talking as a team and deciding what to build or what to do, like how much of that is based off of are drawing in from other people and how much of it is based off of what we've built up and kind of a rational analysis ourselves. And I think that, again, coming back to this idea of not having, of encouraging people to really dig in themselves and not just take, like, we're on a podcast and I'm going to espouse some opinions and not just to suck down my opinions blindly, is an interesting thing. And it's indicative that I think that the age that we find ourselves in, this whole idea of memetic contagion explains a lot of the kind of terrible situations with social media and the fury that people get into, and the it's crazy. It's like people have gone out of their minds. It's like a bunch of damn zombies and taking Instagram photos and all this stuff.
It's happening so fast. Like, it's crazy how, like, this stuff's only 10 years old. Really, Facebook's what, 10 years old?
Yep.
2008.
Yeah.
Where was it? No. 2008. Actually, no, I don't remember.
Yeah, it was around, I think, 05, 06.
Yeah.
And then it was all universities at first and high schools, and it like went on and on and on.
I remember when Facebook first came out. I was like a freshman or sophomore in high school, and I was driving to school with a senior, and I'd be like, "Oh, dude, you're gonna download Facebook?" He's like, "No way, man, not in college yet. Like, need to wait till I get that edu address to download." It was like, but then completely exploded into the monolithic Sauron that it is today.
Yeah.
It's crazy to see that happen very quickly. And what lessons are we going to learn going forward? Because I don't think Facebook will be around for perpetuity. I think they're...
Yeah, we'll see. It's going to be interesting. I mean, they've gotten a lot of flack recently.
I think they're fucking up pretty bad, to the point where people are
everybody's still on Instagram, so
yeah, that's the thing. Instagram.
I mean, people kind of are one of the other principles around that is that
That's
eventually
true.
you have a sacrifice. So the memetic theory thing is that socially, religion served this purpose of kind of calming violence, because you would have some level of a sacrifice, and sometimes that would take the case of like witch burning or whatever. And then when someone sacrificed, then everybody's back at peace, because that person was, the big bad person that was causing all the problems. Yeah. So right now, like, is Facebook this kind of sacrifice that's happening now? Are people putting all the blame there, even though they're not the only one? They're the scapegoat. They are the scapegoat right now. More recently, one thing that annoyed me is what's the guy's name? The Salesforce guy, Marc Benioff.
Yeah, I had that tweet up too.
Marc Benioff, man, he talking shit, calling out Facebook. They suck down. Salesforce sucks down a ton of data.
Pot meat kettle.
Yeah, pot meat kettle. They suck down a ton of data.
Yeah.
And I find it incredibly creepy that Benioff put people were joking about it for you're talking about Sauron, but he put the kind of Sauron, the Eye of Sauron on the Eye of Sauron on the Salesforce Tower on Halloween.
Oh,
on
in
Halloween.
San Francisco.
Yeah, on Halloween.
I remember that.
And someone brought this out. It was like a joke thing, but I thought it was like the whole layering in the last few weeks with Benioff has just been bizarre, because he's coming out just like talking crap about Facebook and how it's like cigarettes and all this stuff. Yet Salesforce, I don't know if you've ever talked to a Salesforce, like, I had somebody using Salesforce to like track you down, close a sale, but they have all these data tracking tools, and the same data tracking tools that Facebook is using, Salesforce is also using to just close sales.
Yeah.
So they're sucking down a ton of data.
And they're throwing rocks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Silly.
Okay. So how do we solve this problem? How do you see Casa solving some of these problems in the long run? Obviously, you've got the node. What are you allowed to talk to what we'll be expanding into the future?
Yeah, I can speak to it a little bit. We've got a few more things we're announcing before the end of the year that are pretty exciting, but ultimately it just comes back down to personal computing.
Okay.
If you back into just a cybernetics point of view, and control loops, right now, the loops that we go through basically, like, you make a decision, you open Instagram or you open one of these other apps. That app is, the loop from you making a single decision and then the kind of response, the data that comes back to you, right now is being manipulated by hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of organizations, other robots, other systems. We need to get back to a place to where we can have some level of computing and some level of, hey, I want some assistance in doing a task, which is what a computer is. I mean, you're just getting some information assistance. We need the ability to have that assistance be one hop. Literally, like I put in an input, it does a calculation. It's only in my kind of local control, and then I get the response, and there's nothing else influencing it.
Mm-hmm. No, that's it's fascinating, and then I guess like I keep asking very similar questions because the crux of it, like, are the incumbents, is the model that they're currently using so good that the fight against a newer model will be pretty big? Like, are you expecting a big fight from incumbent systems, or do you think? Yeah.
Once they sense that there's a real threat.
Yeah.
Right now they don't believe that there's a real threat.
Mm-hmm.
I do have some intel that some of them are moving faster behind the scenes than most people anticipate. So they know there's something on the horizon, but I think they
building
still
systems too.
Yeah. Building competitive systems, like,
for personal compute, or
well, not necessarily for personal compute, just like trying to reinvent themselves to survive and where this is all going.
to like form fit Bitcoin functionalities on, or
kind of, yeah. I mean, just the newer overall model, which I think like Bitcoin is the core representation there of, you could have your own personal miner too if you wanted to. It's not given the efficiency around mining Bitcoin and the cost around mining Bitcoin and the difficulty. That's not going to play out totally, but the system was designed in a way with running nodes, running your own compute, having things local. I think that even having a Trezor and a ledger, right, are really important. And there's something about Trezors and ledgers that even before a node that is that people haven't fully caught on to yet.
What's this?
Because the Trezor and the ledger are fully local compute.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you are using one of the browsers, one of the Trezor Ledger browsers, that is reaching out to some outside servers, and you're still routing some transactions. But the local, holding your private key, generating your private key, all that is local.
Yeah.
It never leaves the device. It never even comes onto the computer that you're interacting with.
Yeah.
That has not happened for like the last 20 or 30 years. Everything has been sucked into a cloud in some capacity. And having fully local data, lockdown data, that has not been happening. So it's really significant that there's like even just this glimmer of that, and we're trying to push more and more in that direction.
No, it's Trezor in particular. That's exactly what you were describing earlier. Like one call, like that's all it does is it communicates with the Trezor API or the Trezor wallet. Page, the bridge they call it, and it's just requests, send back. You have no idea what's going on the device, which is beautiful. And I love that degree of certainty that these types of products provide.
Right. And the control you have with your iPhone apps is just an illusion, right?
Right.
Compared to that, because in that control, like you literally, like there's nothing. You unplug that in between the command that's being sent out. You unplug your device, and it just fails. Mm-hmm. And with your local phones, everything. I mean, there's reports that some of the spy organizations can even turn on phones and turn on microphones, and who the hell knows if that's legit? But
it's definitely legit.
But regardless of that argument's sake, there, it's like are you really in control of your device? You're not. Yeah. So we need to take control again of our local devices and have. And it's going to be kind of a slow roll. What we've built already with Lightning and Bitcoin, simplified interface. It's beautiful. It works. We've already built API layers below that to manage the device, manage more node types, manage like other things. Mm-hmm. So we'll be announcing more and more, but we're going to allow you to do more and more with that device and with future devices. And there's a lot coming down the pipe. We're excited to build, and we've seen a phenomenal response from the community. But we are working very hard to give even more types of experiences, both built on Bitcoin and Lightning, but also not just built on those. Now that you have that local compute there. Yeah.
No, you guys are doing an incredible job. Again, thank you.
Thanks. That the team deserves all the praise. I just I'm a cheerleader, and I've been helping with product design and doing anything I can and running around helping with sales. But the team is just incredible, and there's I'm continually blown away by the level of product, the level of design, the level of just customer support, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even has been, everybody's been doing a phenomenal job. The team is incredible.
Yeah. To pivot back to more philosophical musings, what if we don't succeed? What if we fail? And what if we continue down this path that we're on right now into a more dystopian-like future? Do you think that's possible? Do you think the Bitcoin project and the ethos behind the cypherpunk movement in particular is imperative that more people adopt it?
I don't think that. I think ultimately the kind of core tenets of the cypherpunk movement are not everyone's going to read, Cypherpunk Manifesto and go through and relate to that.
Yeah.
But I think that the core tenets around freedom and control and what it means to be, in control of yourself and your family and your data, and that those things do resonate strongly.
Yeah.
And people will come around and are coming around more and more to that. So, yeah, but you're asking what happens if we don't, what happens if something, breaks and falls apart? I do think that there will be other more bugs. Yeah, there will be other movements. There will be other edges in the system. It's always, this is all, one system builds up and there's a kind of a counter to the extremes that system creates. And the duopoly of systems is consistent. You always see things at extremes. And I think that so something else will emerge in time. And this is not, if you look at even Bitcoin, how many eCash, how many other versions of cash, distributed cash, eGold were happened before Bitcoin took hold. So it won't be the last, but there will be other challenges.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just really worried about a Black Mirror future. China is really showing how that can become a reality.
Yeah. Well, I think ultimately it comes down to the only way we're going to stop it is it's not out of a single company or a single person or a single, we have to work together, and it can't be led just by Casa. Like, we're doing everything to make it easier for people, but it's not just going to be Trezor. It's not just going to be Ledger. It's not just going to be, it's going to take a lot of teamwork, because what everyone in this ecosystem is up against on the other side is just huge.
Yeah. That's why this podcast exists, is to get these ideas out there and just get more people thinking about it. And it's been fun. I say this all the time, but this podcast is selfish. I get to talk to smart people like
nice. Nice.
And pick your brain. Speaking of picking your brain, I've had this tweet up. I've been staring at it the whole goddamn time.
All right. What's
fascinating? That we live in a world dominated by QWERTY keyboards and Newtonian time systems should seriously concern Bitcoiners.
Yeah.
It's a mini thread here. 2-tweet mini thread. Second tweet. Bitcoin will outlast us all, but that doesn't mean it's not possible that a stupid, inefficient, intermediate system could take hold for a decade if we're not careful. For decades, excuse me.
Yeah.
What do you mean by this? My site's going, by the way. I should be able to read this pretty easily. But.
Yeah, it's funny. This tweet didn't get a lot of traction when I sent it out.
I'm gonna retweet it right now.
There it goes. And I actually wipe my tweets every week, I think.
Really?
Yeah. So I don't keep anything up. And I don't think I'm ever really looking for massive visibility. It's like, it's like I want to push the idea out into the world, and I'm looking for feedback, and I'm looking for kind of engagement, but it's something that I've observed that is valuable for myself, and so I push it out to see if it's interesting that you like out of that, my positioning about even why I push these out, that this one stuck out to you, and to bring it up and discuss it.
Yeah, it does stick out to me. It's interesting.
Yeah,
it's again, like we, like Bitcoin makes you think about like the incumbent systems you live within, and the monetary system in particular for me is what it started.
Yeah,
and then like
Yeah.
Bitcoin could be a giant clock as well, so it like makes you think differently about time.
Well, I
and
think
how you coordinate
Bitcoin's
that.
clock is different. Like the way it works is not based off of pure Newtonian time. So so first off, QWERTY keyboards. Like there's that tidbit of this, and then there's the Newtonian time piece, and then there's so let's like break down the actual tweet. QWERTY keyboards. Why do we have QWERTY keyboards?
I have no idea. Because some people, that's just the way they typed at one point. It's typewriters, correct?
Yeah, I think so.
Because you needed the letters spread out a certain way so they didn't collide with each other or something like that.
That's even like up for debate. Mm-hmm. When you go back and look at the history of why it was actually drawn out, I think the original design came from some typewriters. It was also, what do you call people? Telegram writers, right? That were some of the early typists that were hearing a telegram that's routed in, they type it out, that gets sent out. And, ultimately that turns into waves of typists that are just typing out documents. And, you see these scenes, you watch a show like Mad Men or something, and you see these, teams that are just on typewriters, like typing out memos. It's absurd to think about, prior to Word and prior to the personal computers we've had, and that, this is how things built up. But what they found now, as they've dug more and more into the keyboard layout, is that it's incredibly inefficient. QWERTY keyboards are incredibly inefficient. To
what extent?
The weight, I believe that the left-handed side is like overweighted in terms of how often you use some of those keys, and it's something like 70-30%. It's something like that. I don't remember the exact numbers, but I just know it's incredibly inefficient. So you have alternative layouts like Dvorak. There are a lot of engineers that have adopted alternative keyboard layouts because they're aware of this fact, and they're like, this is fucking stupid. And so,
I can't imagine trying to relearn a keyboard.
But that's the thing,
yeah,
right? Is that we now know how inefficient it is.
Okay.
And billions of people use a keyboard at some point every day. And yet, knowing how inefficient it is, billions of people are still using keyboard every day, the same one. And why hasn't it changed? Well, if you look at tooling wise, just making the machine that makes a MacBook's keyboard, right, has already been geared towards QWERTY. And the cost of making that change at a large scale doesn't, just in terms, because people just they use the keyboard, and it works enough for them, so they're not going to change that keyboard. But it's one of these examples of how critical early decisions are, and once a decision is made and something's put out there into the world, that it starts to shape, it starts to kind of feed back in on the rest of the system, and that sometimes you can get these incredibly inefficient patterns that come out there that just can't be corrected as they scale.
No, and that's a very prescient point to bring up, because Satoshi, his decision to go with, what was it, base 48 or base for the encoding of the addresses, he chose base 48, I believe, as opposed to base 64. Or he actually made up a whole new system, because the UX of addresses, if you had capital O's, zeros, lowercase L's, and capital I's, it would confuse users. So that design, That's right. That design decision from the outset has thankfully helped us avoid a terrible UX problem that would have existed.
Yes. So it comes down to small things like that. And I think that the more you look at Bitcoin, the more you find these very small decisions. It's like, holy shit. Like,
right?
Yeah, we avoided a catastrophe by this tiny little thing. Now, but out of that, what's interesting is that it has, at a scale, Bitcoin has taken hold, and it is scaled. It's still largest by market cap. It's still just in terms of mining hash power. But where I'm driving towards is that, we hear investors talk all the time about replacements for Bitcoin and replacements this and that, and it's insane. It's insanity,
right?
Because you're looking at this system that has all these sub pieces that are just incredibly important, and we can build on top of it. And there's no reason yet, whether it's whether it's greed or whether it's the kind of underlying drive. Like, I don't know what is driving it totally, but there is a possibility that we're still early enough in the game that someone else could come up with some other system, or even a layer 2 system that's not as well designed, that could create a lot of mayhem.
Take hold. Yeah. So what should we be thinking about? With this in mind, how should we approach our building of Bitcoin into the future? Building of Bitcoin.
Yeah. I'm not going to tell you that.
Okay, I like that.
You should do it yourself, right?
I like that.
Think about it. Think about it. Everything you do, and how you're using your own systems, and how you're, running your own node, or holding your own keys, or, if Casa's doing something stupid, call us and tell us. Like, we want to know. We try to be really, really careful. We're also operating at scale and trying to scale up and trying to serve more people, but there are a lot of small things that we get wrong, and we do our best. But it's like, I just encourage. I think that for all of the people that have been complaining about like the vitriol and the ecosystem and how sharp people are talking on, come on, we're talking about like the future of capitalism and civilization and humanity, and people are like talking about how, oh my God, someone was mean to me. Like, are you serious? Are you kidding me? Yeah. Go ask like 4 to 5 generations back. Go ask your grandfather or grandmother, what they think about this amazing world we live in, and about whether that mean statement is an issue.
Yeah, sack the fuck up, people.
Yeah, it's crazy.
We are tackling one of the biggest problems in the world. And you asked for, I don't want to say criticism, but you asked for feedback about Casa. Matt Odell has been doing the resync from scratch. He's 65% of the way there.
Excellent.
Last check. He's probably above that right now.
Yeah.
He has a few questions for you. New software updates. How are those rolled out? Privacy OPSEC issue from running a node without VPN or Tor.
Yep.
Communication with the node is done without encryption. I think for ease of use.
Correct.
But is restricted to your own LAN. If your router is compromised, though, this could become an issue.
Correct.
So just expound upon these thoughts.
Excellent analysis, Matt. All good points, all valid points. We actually have stuff in the works for all of these. Bring that up for just a sec, just so I can. I want to make sure and hit all of them. So yes, new software updates are coming. They should roll out about once a week, but we have a few things. We had one that rolled out. There was a small fix. From the privacy side and the optics side, the Tor is coming. Tor support is coming. Better VPN support is also coming. We wanted to get something out the door. One thing that is important to us is like shipping on time and like actually showing up with a real product and getting something out the door and starting that feedback loop. And a lot of companies have not shipped at all. And so getting it out the door was important to us. And we made a few decisions, and we looked at the judge between privacy and security and what the issues were. We're early enough in Lightning Network that we have disclaimers everywhere that, it is still early enough that there could be a bug in our software. There could be a bug in Bitcoin or Lightning software that causes some of your money to be lost. So we are very upfront with people that, be careful about how you're using the device, and, don't put a shit ton of money on the device, or just, be aware of the risks. But out of that, again, we're early enough on that we wanted to get something out the door that people could start using, knowing that as the volume of money flowing through these systems increases, that we would catch up with VPN support, Tor support, lots of other privacy features. So that was a decision, on why to ship now without Tor support.
I think it's a reasonable trade-off.
Yeah, and as usage increases, like that will be out soon. I'm hoping by end of the year, but we're working on it now. As far as communication with the nodes done without encryption, that is also correct. That was also same decision. We do have a scheme that we're working on, and we have I can't go into exact detail about how that works right now. But we had an alpha working version whenever we launched the node, but we decided to pull it out because complexity was an issue. There were issues that it could cause some login issues, and just again in user interface and being able to use the node could cause some issues. So we pulled that out. and are relying on the fact that you're on your local LAN, your local Wi-Fi. Again, for the amount of money that's being currently spent and currently used on the system, it shouldn't be an issue. You should be on your own private LAN. You should be on your own private Wi-Fi. We are very, very public about that, or very, very upfront about that. But we do have some solutions for that as well that will be out pretty soon. So
Sweet.
Both of those, all good points, and I'm appreciative to Matt for digging in and seeing those and bringing those up. And any other questions people have, please let us know. But we have solutions for these. We are very aware, and those were made for a specific reason to get these out the door so people could start using them.
Yeah. No, and I think that's like I said, a reasonable trade-off to make, and I think shipping on time is important, and you want that feedback as quickly as possible.
Exactly, and this is exactly the feedback we want, because again, coming to the product development side, if you're not practicing surveillance product development and we're not tracking everything you're doing, then it comes down to you actually using the product. So we got it to the place that we knew would be good enough, that was great user experience, has a few security trade-offs. We know we want to improve those, but we wanted to get them into people's hands so we could start getting feedback as soon as possible, and so we could start working on the next iterations of everything in this, both the software, more applications, and there's more coming down the path. So
sweet. No, love it. Again, I can't wait. Can't wait to start experimenting more with it once everything's synced. So what Lightning Network in particular, what excites you most about that? What are you seeing?
Honestly, just like the recent increases in overall volume on the network, just in the last week. I mean, I think you've seen the total. Yeah, I think you've seen the total number of Bitcoins on the network practically double, or a little more.
Hell yeah!
It's not in the last few weeks.
Andreas Brecken, like just.
I think there are probably one or two nodes that have just been loading up and putting more Bitcoins on, and that's great. Like, and I think that's. We've been bringing more attention to the network. There's some other teams that have been bringing more attention to the network. And so, getting more excitement around that, more people using it, and more liquidity on the network is awesome.
Yeah. And then, so beyond what you guys are building, like product wise, are you contributing to the open source stuff? Or that was a terrible way to frame the question. Step back. Obviously that's a big crux of argument in this space, is how do you incentivize development, and like what chain code does and what Blockstream does by sponsoring developers that work solely on the protocol or on the Bitcoin repository or Lightning, whatever it may be, is a growing trend. And do you guys, obviously your work contributes to this indirectly, but are you focused on
directly as well? So a few things there. One, we do actually, we've done a few sponsorships of some other conferences that are very heavily focused on research side and not on token shit. Yeah. So that's one, and that's very direct. I think it was Scaling Bitcoin out in Japan, Tokyo. I think that's the conference, and Jameson went out there, and we sponsored that. Two, in terms of we have been contributing to our own code to some existing open source repositories. Some of those have been around signing. Some of those have been Trezor or Ledger, as we find bugs or find issues. Like we've contributed. Third thing is that we will be open sourcing some different components of the node, most of the node. In its current iteration, and so that should be out relatively soon. We have a post coming that will explain our open source strategy. The reason why we haven't posted any of that to date is that it is actually like we're fighting an internal battle to develop new features, develop new products, test ourselves, just get the damn thing out the door, and then managing open source community, managing packaging it right. We want to make sure that it's packaged well too, and those things, and building an open source project is a very different endeavor. Ultimately, I think that it is important to support open source communities, support open source code. I think that private source code in some cases is perfectly fine. It's just a question of what you're contributing to and what the security trade-offs are. And so some parts of our system will be fully private, some parts will be fully open source. all of that is being decided with a very strict security framework, and just in terms of kind of how we're trying to build the best experience possible.
Yeah. No, that's it's important. It's a holistic experience is very important, and it feels like, I mean, it's been said on Twitter. I don't know if you agree with this or like this description, but Casa becoming like a lifestyle brand almost for cypherpunks or people that like the supreme of Bitcoin almost. Like
interesting. I have
know?
not heard that. Yeah. I mean, I think ultimately, as long as we can solve this problem of helping give people self-control and self-sovereignty, then like, you know, I don't give a shit what people think of it like us or how we end up as a brand or whatever, if we solve that problem.
Yeah.
So I you know, we view the world where we're heading. It is almost an ideal state if we can get everything open source on a local device that you control. It's reliable. I mean, that is an ideal state. You know, getting to that point, how you get there is a multi-tiered approach. You're going to have to have some private, some public. You may take some code that's fully private for a long time and then open source it kind of all at once after a couple years of being developed. We may take, right now, there are some pieces that are centralized and there are some pieces that are decentralized in terms of what we're doing. But all of it is based around this core security model of the core mission of maximizing personal sovereignty and safety. And so I think that, and one thing that we actually, you don't see a lot of discussion on our website or elsewhere about decentralize this, decentralize that, decentralize all the things. It's not about decentralization. Decentralization is just a path. What the thing that I constantly say is resilience is the key. What we want is, you know, personally controlled, resilient computing, resilient tools. We want resilient lives. We want to have resources and family and experiences and build communities together that can survive in a variety of environments. And so it's all about resiliency. Now, the way you get that resiliency, decentralization is one way, but there are other areas to where decentralization actually hurts your resiliency. So if the measure for us is around that security and resiliency, even privacy. I think some people oversell and overplay this question of privacy. Like, privacy is not the actual goal. It's not just about privacy. It's ultimately about your control. And there are some cases, you know, where you can walk in a public square or whatever, and your privacy is shit. But it's like, as long as the public square is safe, it's okay.
Yeah.
It ultimately just comes down to that question of resiliency, and privacy is, again, a means to gain that resiliency in some cases.
Yeah. It's just the ability to have the choice of privacy is imperative.
Right.
Which is an important distinction.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. No, this has been a fascinating conversation, man.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me, man.
Thanks for coming on. What's your parting note for the freaks out there?
Let's see.
Anything. Bitcoin, life.
Yeah.
Love.
Give us feedback. Go buy a node, store.casa, and follow us on Twitter, Casa HODL, HODL. There's a lot more coming just in the next few weeks, actually, that I'm excited about. So keep an eye on those things, and give us any feedback you have. Anybody that's using your node, send payments, connect to us. We've got some open channels. But we're excited. We're excited. The response of the community has been amazing. We're excited to continue contributing to that and growing that. And Casa nodes make a great stocking stuffer. So
They do.
Actually, we were announcing one other product too that is, I think we're going to sell out of pretty quick.
Yeah.
So definitely this is definitely going to be a stocking stuffer, and it's cheaper than a Casa node. It'll be interesting. But I definitely like that one's a real stocking stuffer, so keep an eye on.
God damn it, Jeremy!
I
don't want to spend any more money on Christmas.
Yeah.
I'm
just telling you, this thing's cool. It's fun. Cool. I'm excited about it. And I was hoping to get it out in November, but we were a little delayed. But we'll be announcing in another couple weeks. But it's a pretty simple product, and so it's once it's out, I think people will get why we're doing it. But again, it all just fuels back into maximizing personal sovereignty and safety, dude.
Hell yeah.
It's crazy. It's crazy to me that a company didn't exist that, like, that's just the sole goal.
Right.
Up until now. That's crazy. We'd be, you know, I think that being we joke that we're like just a sovereign service corporation, and if like all we exist to do is just help feed you ways to be sovereign, that's awesome.
Pretty sick
It's a
gig.
hell of a business.
Pretty sick gig. Thank you again for building it. Thanks for coming through the studio on the Sunday morning.
Yeah, of course.
in
Of
Brooklyn.
course. Thanks for hosting me.
Thanks for coming. I'm very much looking forward to what you guys are dropping in the coming weeks. I will definitely be tweeting about it, possibly writing about it too.
Cool.
Probably talking about a rabbit hole recap. Peace and love, freaks.